Well, hello. We are waiting for some folks to come on over while I finish setting up some random bits here. So stand by. Should be kicking in fairly soon. But welcome for those of you that are here early. We have a fun stream planned for you that has been kind of requested by popular demand in the streamer Discord, amongst other chats that we've seen in other streams. We're going to look at one of my favorite packages for managing infrastructure in the R ecosystem, and that is they're here. And of course my alert still doesn't work. I thought I fixed it. All right, anyway, welcome Jesse, welcome friends. You're going to go from watching fun art, design, talk, and pumpkin carving to carving out some infrastructure with our packages. So, you know, that's the best segue I got. So, welcome. As I was mentioning earlier, this has been kind of a bit of popular demand request, as I've been a heavy cheerleader for a certain package that I think has been a huge help in my daily work, and it doesn't get enough love, so to speak. We are going to take a look at my use of the renv package. I will admit I've heard it pronounced both ways, but I'm fairly certain I think it's renv, and I have a good reason why that I'll share in a little bit. So let's dive into it. Let's say hello to everybody on our friendly chat stream. The stream deck is working. Hello, Unicorn Coder, Jesse, Afton, Tan. I think we have some others working there too. So welcome, and certainly I want any question you have about renv. I can't promise I'll be able to answer it, but I have been using it since practically the beginning. Because I was one of the there's a history here. I'll get into some of the history lesson as we go. First I'll mention I was referring to in Jesse's stream. I had to go to plan B for audio. That's this, because my fancy new earbuds here for some reason did not charge the left side, so I did not want to listen to one ear tonight. I need to hear my music in all my glory, stereo mode. So yes, hello Daniel, welcome back. So let's dive into it. I'm going to start by showing a couple websites, and then we're going to hop in both VS Code and RStudio as a demonstration of how seamless renv is, and not just one environment, but multiple environments, and in containers if we go to it. So it is literally a very, very critical part of my open source R development now. So, okay, enough talk, let's get into it. So that's one resource. I'm going to start dragging in the other ones. Yes, the Unicorn Code, this is the Phantom third monitor that I am so excited that actually works. Now I just have to resize this thing a little bit. All right. I'll find a way to adjust this on the fly in the future, but those are tweaks for another day. Okay, I feel good about that. Let's just whoops, gotta get the mouse back. So I have to like move the mouse like in haphazard ways to get all this going. All right. So I will not be able to get into all the history of renv, but the good news is that I know a certain episode where you can get into the history of renv a little bit. That is right here. This is straight from RStudio Conf 2020. I believe this was recorded about the last day of it. I was able to snag Kevin Ushey, the author of renv, to talk about the story of how renv came to be and why it is frankly so much better than Kevin's first attempt at this, called Packrat. I was a heavy user of PackRat when it first came out. It did a lot of good things, but it had some choices in the design of it that even Kevin admits he wished he could have had a do-over. renv is that do-over. So I would get lots of complaints at work about PackRat not being performant enough, not being intelligent about snapshotting packages and all that good stuff, and even I would fight with it a little bit. But renv, in my opinion, has been 1000% better. So yes, that was a fun interview. That was also, this was recorded shortly after JJ O'Leary's announcement of RStudio becoming a public benefit corporation. That was in the keynote of that conference, and that was a kind of a transformative moment. That's where you see me literally near the front row, getting that snapshot. And fun fact, I think just coincidentally, right towards the beginning of that, Hillary Parker came in and sat next to me, and we were talking shop about a few things. So and she actually kind of knew the scoop of this story, and she couldn't tell anybody. She had to tell me to wait for JJ to say it. And I kept saying, please don't let RStudio be bought by Microsoft. And she was like, all I can say, Eric, is I think you're going to like it. And I was like, well, I hope you're right. Yeah, she was. So that was a big moment. I have fond memories of that conference. Obviously, lots of things have changed since then in the world, but it's always fun to reminisce. So yeah, check out episode 32. I will put that in the chat in case you all want to listen to that while you're doing dishes or maybe lunch prep for family. I don't know. So let's get into renv a little bit. renv can be found. It's got its own package down site. Kevin really does a great job with the documentation here, so I will put that in the chat. So you're going to see a barrage of links as we go. But renv is easy to get installed. And once you get the hang of how to bootstrap a project, it is very intelligent, and it will ask you questions before it does anything crazy. I really think it's a lot more of a user experience enhancement than PackRat was. And maybe we take a little bit a minute here to say, why would you care about something like this? Why would you care about package management? Well, this becomes really important when you do production stuff with R, because a lot of times we are interfacing on what I'll call a central installation of R that is maintained by people outside of us. Maybe it's an IT group, maybe it's a hybrid of a data science and IT group. And of course, from time to time, the system is going to get upgraded at some point, say with a new version of R. And with that might come a new set of packages. And if you build a production application, say with Shiny, or you build a production API with Plumber, or any kind of like workflow that depends on a very specific set of packages, you never know when one of those packages getting updated might totally break everything. I have lots of stories where this has happened. Some of it with tidyverse stuff, some of it with lower level stuff with RCBB, some of it, lots of little stories here and there. renv, its job is to say, okay, for this project, you are using this set of packages. I am going to snapshot that state of your package library, and I will make sure, no matter what happens outside of this project, that you, the analyst or the data scientist in this project, no packages will be upgraded unless you tell me to do it. That is a critical component of reproducibility, transparency, collaboration, and making sure stuff doesn't hit the fan when something gets upgraded on the HPC system. I know that from experience. So I kid you not, some people don't believe me when I say this, but I will say it. no matter big or small of a project, no matter if it is a simple analysis to answer a question from leadership, or if it's like my massive 30,000 line code Shiny app in production, renv is used for all of it. Is it overkill? Maybe. But nothing bad has happened to me by using renv. Only good things have happened. So obviously things like this exist in other languages. In particular, Python has the concept of virtual env or virtual envs. This is very much like that. It's within a project, controlling the dependencies related to that software package. But it is important to note that renv won't solve absolutely everything of reproducibility. But at least from the R side of things, it gets really, really close. So, good question, Isomor. Is renv as important as Git? Sorry, I gotta bring the chat back here. In my opinion, if you're doing any production stuff with R, absolutely yes. And in fact, they go really well together. And that becomes really important for collaboration. Because the last thing I want is that when I bootstrapped a very nice Shiny app that became a really big one, that we happen to collaborate with a vendor on. This vendor, of course, is using, well, now they use the version of R that we have at the company, but before they were just doing it on their laptop stuff and all that good stuff. In the GitHub repo, I can commit the renv manifest, the renv kind of lock file. And that assures me that when they clone the project on their setup, that even if they are using a different version of R, it's going to pull down those same set of packages of what I'm working with. So combined with Git, it is arguably one of the easiest ways to make sure that a whole team of developers can start on the same footing. Because I have lost way too many hours, and I care to count, of somebody not taking my advice and trying to install R on their laptop and getting into fits with a different version of a package that, say, has a Java dependency or something. And I say, well, I had it all set up. I had a Git repo. All you had to do was clone it. And they're like, oh, Git's kind of scary. Whatever. There's only so much I can do. I literally try to hand it to them on a silver platter, and sometimes they just throw it back in my face like my kids do. So you do what you can, but renv, I think it's really, really easy to do it. And Daniel, you have great points. I do use renv even with the GitHub action associated with the shinycal streamer data. That has been hugely helpful to know that my development environment is going to be basically the same as the environment that Microsoft is magically spinning up in those GitHub actions. So this is, again, really important. So we're going to start diving into how you bootstrap an renv project and what are some of the cool functions that you can use to kind of keep track of certain things, to maybe tweak it a little bit to your liking. I don't use all the capabilities of renv, but I have seen some cool ones come in that even I might try tonight, even just to learn for myself. So let's dive into this. Let's get this. We'll start with VS Code, but we'll probably swap to RStudio. Actually, you know what? Let's do RStudio first, because RStudio itself does come with some nice integrations with renv, actually. So let's get that going here. I think I'm gonna have to do a new project. In fact, I'm glad I did this. I literally got this started, my fancy schmancy Docker container stuff. I just got it installed literally within 3 minutes of going live here. And I did the GitHub repo waiting for my son's swim lesson to practice, because I'm such a geek. I bring my laptop with me when my kids at a sports practice. Okay, enough of that. So we're going to do existing directory. We call this renv learning. We're going to choose it there. Great project. Now this, for all intents and purposes, is an ordinary R project. There's nothing special going on here. It's got the packages that I've installed in this manifest. of the Docker file. So nothing about renv has happened yet. So just to show you, it's a clean slate. Let me catch up on the chat here. Oh my, Wes Basita Buddha as looks like a horror story on IT, not listening to them about how setting up renv effectively. I feel for you. That does happen. And yeah, we're gonna get to like the lock file, the profile file, which are important things, and frankly, it's files that you personally should not touch yourself once all this is set up, because you can break things pretty badly if you're a little careless. So right now, this is just an ordinary R project. It's got some packages I put as part of the Docker file. So imagine this is like your central R library on your laptop, on your computer, or your organization server on some Linux environment. The easiest way to initialize renv would be, let me see here. There should have been a button there somewhere. Usually they have a button in the IDE to do renv with a project, but there are ways. Let's see if we have any project options. I'm kind of curious. Yes, okay, so let me slow down. I went a little faster. So if you're in RStudio, easiest way is to go to project options, and you go to environments, and if you're using a recent version of RStudio, certainly the one that's out right now, maybe a couple versions ago, it's as easy as checking a box. Use renv with this project. Let's do this. So we hit OK. And that was so fast. It just does, in the background, it just launches some renv functions for you. This is called renv activate. And notice what the console's saying here. It's saying that project and then your directory path is loaded, renv 0.13.2. The other thing to note is that suddenly my package list became a lot smaller. I had a boatload of packages in the central library, but what happens is now the R session is looking at renv's package library, not the package library that you have outside of this. There are ways to get to the outside library if you really want, but to be honest, you probably shouldn't have to. It should be easy enough to start adding the packages you want in the renv library. So all these packages you see here basically come from the base and extended set of base R packages. Now, what do you do to get a package in? Now, I do this because of muscle memory, because I used renv from the early days, but renv itself has a function called install. Why I do this kind of verbatim, even though they apparently have a hook to the old install.packages function, is because I can use this function for not only package installs from CRAN, also from packages installed from GitHub, and it's smart enough to do a different thing for each. Now, what do I mean by that? Oh yeah, absolutely, Unicorn Coder. I will zoom in a bit. Let's do that. Let's see. Make sure this works. Okay, let's try that, see if that works. Okay, Isomore asks, what about personal packages? So this is kind of a similar story as those, well, it depends what you mean by personal packages. Do you mean packages that aren't on GitHub or CRAN that just you've made the installer for yourself and you just want to install those in? Oh, yes, okay. Yes, renv will definitely let you do that. But it looks like there's an interesting point about pack with that case. But we'll get to pack. I promise we're going to get to pack. I've committed to it. I'm ready for it. We'll talk about that when we get to the pack stuff. So if you wanted to install a personal package and you had like the installer for it, you can simply feed in the local path to that installer file in this function, I believe, and it should just be able to do that for you. I have not done packages that haven't been hosted on GitHub or CRAN, so I don't have as much experience of that. But let's install a package that, of course, will be the surprise of nobody that I want to install. Let's just make sure that it's not here right now. It is not. Let's do Shiny. Now, I think most people realize if they use Shiny before, if you have like a clean installation of R, so to speak, and you have just got it installed, you've got only the base packages. If you install Shiny, it's got a lot of dependencies because it does a lot under the hood, right? Well, because of some settings I've done with renv that I'll explain in a moment, let's watch how long this takes. That was what, 5 seconds, if that? But pay attention to the messages here. Once we got the Shiny new version, which I believe 1.7.1 literally came out last week, perhaps a new version of BSlib, notice everything else was installed very quickly because it says link cache. renv, by default, will let you take advantage of you might say, a one directory location to put package installation files. So what I mean by that is, if we look at the inside of renv, and we'll get to directory stuff in a little bit, but this is where all the action happens. We have a library folder, goes by the version of R, the architecture of it, and then you do see folders for each package. But I got a story for you. These installers were copied here, not from the internet. They were copied from a cache location. The advantage of the cache is that if you reuse packages across different renv projects, or use the same ones, I should say, it won't go to the internet each time to install them. It will use the cache first, and if it finds it in the cache, it's just going to install it from that. So typically on a new R installation requesting Shiny, especially if you're on Linux and you're compiling from source, this would probably take 10 minutes. I kid you not, it would probably take that long. Here, it took barely 5 seconds. So renv, even off the bat, is doing some nice things from a caching perspective. But the other thing to note is that renv is compatible on the Linux side with installing packages from RStudio's package manager service, which hosts binary versions of packages for Linux. This is recent as of maybe a year and a half ago, where before, if you wanted to install stuff on Linux, you were kind of stuck with compiling from source. And if you ever compiled string I from source, you know that was rough. That was really rough. Westpacific Buddha asks, what happens if your version of Shiny is not the current version of Shiny? So what actually happened is that in my setup, I think I had a slightly older version of Shiny. So if you're just installing the name of a package and it's in the cache, but there's an up-to-date version available, I believe it will find the up-to-date version instead from CRAN or GitHub or whatever the resource is. So I believe that's the case. I can't confirm that, but I believe that's happened to me in the past. But okay, so we got these packages in, and sure enough, they're going to show up here in my package library. We got Shiny there, we got RCPP, we got all those promises, all that fun stuff. Well, because that's the topic of the week, right? Let's just see what happens. Well, I have it as a cache, so I've got myself a Lubridate install. Because I did this many times before, so not sure what would have happened if we didn't have the cache there. But now it's important to know that right now this project I have has no actual code in it yet. I have not made an R script that depends on these packages. So what we can do is every time you install a new package, I definitely recommend at least executing the rm status. What this does is going to kind of check the lay of the land, so to speak. It's going to check what's happening in your package library. And notice here, it honestly didn't care about anything else but renv itself. We'll get to why that is in a little bit. But of course, you need renv to deal with renv, recursive overload. So let's take a device. Let's do a snapshot, and we'll see what happens when we do that. So whenever you do a snapshot, this is like literally like taking a camera, taking a picture, and filing away for prosperity, so to speak. You're going to take the version of renv that's installed in this, 0.13.2, and when you see the notation of like the asterisk and then to the version number, this means that it was not here before. So I'm going to say yes. And now it says, okay, I've written a lock file to the root of my repository, rm.lock. And let's take a look at what that looks like here. Let's go back to our project area. And here, the lock file, I will say, unless you absolutely have to, do not touch this manually. It can be easy to mess stuff up if you mess up the structure of this file. But notice it says the version of R, that's always important, and the repositories. So my CRAN repository happens to be the package manager from RStudio, because whenever I do development stuff on my stream, all my personal R projects, ain't nobody got time to wait for source packages to install unless I absolutely have to. So that's why I use the package manager. And what was nice about my container setup, which we'll probably touch on a little bit, is that the fine folks at the Rocker project took care of this for me, and I didn't have to do anything different. They made it by default in their Docker-based R containers. Yet another reason why I've been pestering Jesse to adopt these container setups sooner or later, because these things happen so fast. I can't go back to the old way. But then you see the packages section, and this is where all your packages are going to be listed here. So right now we only have RM. Got the version, the source, the repository, and the hash, which is kind of like the same thing in Git. It's a unique ID for the state of that package at the time we snapshotted it. So okay, let me catch up on chat. Oh, Cedar Prince, welcome. Thanks for joining. Yes, we're all about RM tonight. And there may have been some, Daniel's referring to install uses the same machinery as restore when installing packages. Yes, the local cache is used when possible. That's a key point. But install does have some tricks, which I'll show in a little bit as well. So Unicorn Coder knows some of my container exploits outside of the R world. This has not been slimmed yet with Docker Slim, but I am very close with the developer advocate, if you will, named Martin, and we're gonna do some cool Docker Slim stuff with R containers, probably in a joint session again. I was on one of their Twitch streams. I think it was actually on YouTube at that time, I can't remember, a few months ago, and we looked at doing Shiny in a Docker Slim container, and we learned a lot through the process, and they're using that as like one of the examples of using cool container technology for data science. So I'm kind of a pioneer in that, because I'm such a geek about Linux. It sometimes pays off to have friends that are a lot smarter than you that you can just pester and be like, hey, can you try this with R? Yeah, we can. Absolutely. Okay, Isomore asks, how does Docker work with parallel stuff? Do you mean like parallel computing, or do you mean like other types of parallel? Just want to make sure you're I'm understanding that correctly. But okay. Yes, parallel computing. In short, Docker should let you use your local computer's resources as if you were not in the container when it comes to multi-core processing, and even with the right setup, a GPU as well. Because I know some containers out there that can interface with NVIDIA CUDA. In fact, I have an NVIDIA card in the streaming box, and that's on my list when I get to the modeling stuff for perhaps some training for a certain data science game show, to start looking at leveraging high performance computing like GPUs in my machine learning models. So I don't believe Docker will be a barrier to that, but there just might be some additional settings that you have to set up. So good question though. So okay, now you may be wondering, okay, well, how do we get those packages that we installed besides RM into the log file? Well, frankly, the way you do that is you make a script, and you start doing some data analysis. So let's just do a new Shiny app through this interface. I have a pet peeve, by the way. I don't know if Jesse's watching, but I'll tell you a pet peeve of mine about this way of launching Shiny apps in RStudio. Let's see if it still does this. Like, I'm gonna call it silly. Watch what happens. It does a subdirectory for it. I don't want a subdirectory for my app. I want it to be at the root of the repo, because let me, the Shiny developer, determine where the app goes, so to speak. So, little mini rant. So what I do in these cases is I simply go back to the fancy old terminal here. I'm going to move it out of that subfolder and move it up to the proper level. Okay. I am picky about my Shiny app structure, so that's just the way it goes. Okay, so we all about app.r. It's going to be probably the infamous Geyser, Old Faithful Geyser, but let's just make sure it works. Yep, we got our fancy schmancy histogram here. Everything works. Lickety split. Okay, we're good. Now, let's see about what does renv think about what's happened right now. I always say, so again, I'm going to mix this with some practical tips to learn some the easy way and some the hard way. Never feel guilty about asking renv questions. There's no such thing as a stupid question to renv. And let's see what renv thinks the status is. And now you see it's a lot different than before. Look at all those packages. These are the dependencies of Shiny and Shiny itself, because the app.r has library Shiny. So renv is not going to think you need a package unless you specifically state it as part of your scripts. And this also works the same for package development as well, which I've been doing on almost every live stream with the Golem package, so it works the same way. I'm going to get to that with specific Buddha. I've got thoughts on that. But now we've got all these packages here, and it's saying, okay, well, I'm going to recommend you use RM snapshot to add these packages to your library. Sorry, my head's in the way. There we go. All right. So let's take it up on its offer. Let's do RM snapshot. This is going to look that different than from before. But the big difference is we got a whole bunch of packages that are about to be recorded. Do we want to proceed? Absolutely we do. And now we got our log file. And just to show what the log file looks like, we now have a lot more in here. R6, RCPP, we could go on and on. They're all here. Now this is the point when, if you're just setting this up and you're ready for collaborators or even future you to work on this project, use Git. Use it. And before we go further, let's look at the RProfile file. This is another important file that you do not want to mess with unless you know what you're doing. In the case of renv, the R profile file is going to be executed at startup when the project is loaded or when R is launched in the same directory as the project. And all it does is it sources a script that was made for you. You never have to write this activate.r script. renv does that for you. And all the R profile snippet here does is source that, which does all the machinery of getting renv set up in your project and loading the manifest, loading the lock file, getting the status up to date, all that fun stuff. But again, I'll reiterate, unless you know what you're doing, do not touch files here manually. There are functions that renv has that change settings that do manipulate these files, but let renv do the hard work for you. Again, you can never be too noisy with renv. It wants to hear from you. Be nice to it. It'll be nice to you back. So, this is the point where, getting back to my original train of thought, you definitely want to commit this stuff right now, but I want you to pay attention to something kind of cool here. In that renv folder, you notice there was a lot more stuff besides the git ignore and the activate file, right? That's because renv by default will not, and I repeat, not commit the actual package library or into the GitHub repo. I have lots of stories about this from the pack rat days that I'll share in a little bit. But what this means is that your GitHub repo is still really lightweight and only has your code, any maybe data files, or anything that your project needs to do your analysis or application development. It does not try to bundle the whole kitchen sink of your package library. This is very, very nice. And it's a welcome change. Technically, Packrat kind of did the same thing, but not as well, in my opinion. So let's get all this stuff set up. Now, I will mention that because this is a container setup, it does not know who I am, so to speak, from the Git side of things. So I haven't found out how to automate this yet in my container setup. So I have to tell Git who I am. This is muscle memory at this point because I have to do this so much in my containers. Okay, now the commits won't get mad at me, but let's commit these. Initial, commit, live on Twitch. All right. Very fast, just a few text files, nothing fancy. We got the app file in there. So now this is the point where we could push this up. In fact, let's go ahead and do that. We're ahead by one commit here. And there we are. And let's check our GitHub repo, and you can, I'm not sure how much we'll do with this tonight, but I will put this in the chat if you all want to follow along. There we are. So yeah, Daniel has a great question. How could I not put that Git instruction stuff in a run command in Docker? I think I can. I just, last time I tried it, I think I had some weird issues with it, because it was still trying to run it as root, and I want the container, once it's spun up, to run as my user account, which means that I'm the same account as what's on my actual machine right here, which means all the permissions, so like my directories, are preserved. So it gets a little tricky when you get Docker wanting to run stuff as root and then trying to tell it to do some certain commands after the root stuff is done. And this is actually a great question I'm going to talk to my friends at Docker Slim about and see if they have any better ways of doing it. So I thought about, copying a git config file. Yeah, I might try that too. That could definitely work. But okay, we've got our, let's refresh our repo here. I don't think I refreshed it yet. Yep, so now we got everything here. It's got the app file, it's got the rm directory, and it only has these two things. But it has the profile, .r profile, and the lock file. This is critical when you want to share this with other people. Because once they clone the repo and they launch R for the first time, RM is going to say, hey, this is an RM project. Oh wait, you don't have those packages. You want me to install them for you? And it'll prompt you through that process. It'll be nice to you. Yeah, there is some file permission stuff. I think that's probably why I didn't do that right away. It will be solved at some point, but sometimes you have to balance time with banging your head against the wall. So that is kind of my explanation for getting started with RM. Now I'm going to start sharing some cool stuff we can do, especially with the cache. So we're going to get lower level here. And let me think, how should I show you this stuff? One mini pet peeve I have about RStudio is that I do have a hidden directory here called .dev container that doesn't show up here. I'm a little peeved about that. But that's why we have two interfaces for such things. We are now going to go back to VS Code. Now, VS Code needs a little help with RM to help it start. It's a long story, but VS Code and the R extension expects things in certain ways, and if you use RM, by default, those things are not available. Oh, hey, thank you for the bits. Oh, that may be the first time we've had that. Westminster Buddha, thank you so much. You are very kind. I'll have to put those to good use. Don't know why that's happening there in the VS Code. So let me tell you what I mean. This is what I mean. So the VS Code extension for R depends on a separate package in R called language server. Well, as you saw, I definitely did not have language server in that RM project. So VS Code is trying to find it, and now nothing's going to work correctly with RM until I do a little tweak. What's that tweak? This is what I learned through a bit of trial and error and some conversations with Kuhn Ren and the team behind the VS Code R extension. We're going to start going lower level here. I have, in essence, a template R profile file that's tweaked for VS Code. But what's nice about this is that this will work without a problem, even in the RStudio version of the project. So the trick is to determine if we're in VS Code. And if we are, we have to source a certain file that is put somewhere in the in kind of the default directory when you spin up the project, this VS Code init.r. So I found that out the hard way, because this needs to be done before you can activate your RM project. And if you're in VS Code, we need to determine if the packages we need are actually there. I have thought about that. I think I mentioned to Kevin in passing that I was doing some stuff with VS Code and RM, so I will think about that. Yeah. But this is where you get some cool stuff with RM itself. If you want to go a little bit behind the hood, you can grab dynamically what packages are installed in your library with a little trickery here. And we're actually going to run this in the other project before we get through this, so I can show you what, if you want to go lower level with RM, what happens here. So let's see, what's that? We're using a hidden function or a non-exported function called RM diagnostic packages library. That's a mouthful. Let's see what that gives. What? Why did I not do a variable here? Let me see. Oh, I need this. Okay, I need this. Let me just copy the whole snippet here. It's been a while since I did this, so I'm kind of refreshing my own memory on this, so to speak. What does this act? Oh, I think what this does is a dynamic way to say, okay, where's my project located at? So you can see here, if I just type project here, it got my directory. So in essence, where I'm at for this project. And now we're gonna grab the packages from this. And all that snippet, which I got from either the renv issue tracker or the VS Code R extension issue tracker. I did not come up with it myself, as much as I wish I had. But basically, it's a way for me to grab the package names that are available. So now this is gonna be consistent with the log file that we just snapshotted earlier. These are all my packages dynamically grabbed from the machinery of RM. So this is cool. We're not necessarily hacking internals. We're just taking a little bit of a nosy peek into it. But the functions are here, so we're using it. So back to the VS Code stuff. What we do here is we say, okay, we've got this package list. Now, if we're in VS Code, that's what the sys.getM term program stuff does. This will resolve to VS Code if we're actually in VS Code, but if we're not in VS Code, this environment variable will resolve to something like Bash or Windows. I don't know what the Mac one would be, but in other words, something not this. So if we execute this in RStudio, this snippet here will never be run. It's only gonna be run in VS Code. But that's where we do some more stuff here. This is another hidden function, RM project resolve. Oh, that's the same thing. It's just getting the project name. I remember now. Oh, what am I looking at? I should be looking at here. Then it's just simply calling rm install, the name of the package I want. So you can see these are packages that I use for my VS Code setup. Some are absolutely necessary, and these two are optional for the interactive graphic, plotting device, and the debugger, which I'm not mastered yet. And then the last step is to tell VS Code and the R session in particular to use this fancy HTTP GD package for the plotting. That's all stuff I got from their repos. I just plugged it in here. So the idea is that I take this template and manually just superimpose this on the existing .r profile file, which is, where is it? Let me get out of here. Right here. We just override it. And then, if we launch an R terminal here, now you notice it's going to install these packages. And like before, most of this is cached. So that was maybe slightly longer than the Shiny install, but and then we're done. Now, Daniel has a good question. Why couldn't you just manually install a language server and snapshot it? I absolutely could, but I got tired of doing that part manually. Once I figured out this kind of inside the source of RM, as long as I just copy that R profile file, now that's all done for me, and I don't it will not have to do it again because it's going to find this package. Well, it only well, let me see, what did it I cleared the console here. It should have just installed the packages associated with those, with language server. Sorry, I get back to my cursor here. Let's see what it did. You know, that's a good point, Daniel. It does overlap some packages again, and I don't know why, but at least they're in the cache, so it's kind of like no harm, no foul. But that is a kind of a nuisance, I guess, that it didn't know we had some of those already. I'll have to do more research into that, but because of the cache, it's literally like a millisecond, so not a huge deal. But when I launch this R session again, And we'll quit out of this and we'll launch it again. Now it didn't have to do that installation again. It already has everything. But you may be curious, like my advice from earlier. Always be nice to RenV and be polite and ask it if it needs a little help. Well, it does, because now these packages are technically part of my VS Code setup, so we want to add them in. So let's add them in. Got it. So now our lock file has changed again. And now, to prove that this all works without a problem in both environments, let's get out of VS Code, go back to RStudio. We're going to restart our R session here. And let's check the status. Already synchronized with a lock file. So RStudio does not care about that VS Code stuff. But now if I hop to VS Code, I've got what I need to now fully and seamlessly switch between the two. That to me was one of my biggest victories in this whole dev container setup, is what RenV has given to me. Now I finally get to the detail. How the heck did I get that cache so intelligent between the two environments? Well, let's go back to VS Code and look at my Docker file. You don't need Docker for this step, but I'll show you where I did it. So this is my Docker file for the VS Code version of everything. We don't have time to get into all this. There's a bunch of Linux stuff here. But notice, even in the container, if I don't want to use RenV specifically for the project, I still install language server and RenV just in case in like the default R installation. And yes, we're going to get to lovely pack in a little bit. So we do some Python stuff, and actually it's not in this file, it's somewhere else. Where do I do this stuff? I do it here. Where do I do it? Now I gotta remember where I did this stuff. Yes, here. Okay. So in Docker, there's the idea of mounting file system directories. And yes, you all have discovered my Easter egg of the pat command. I knew somebody would eventually. So I tell it to use these directories as mounts that I'll use later on in the RenV kind of logic. And how did VS Code know about those paths? Well, that's over here. So you can set up environment variables multiple ways. A lot of people like to do the .renviron file in their home directory, whether it's Windows, Mac, or Linux. Or you can do an environment file like this from the lower level of Linux and here, and we can say, okay, we can use these environment variables of where the cache is on the host system, where the cache will be in the container. And I think this is, yeah, this is redundant. There's a reason I have to do both. I forgot which. But let's take a look at what this folder actually looks like. So we're going to do this multiple ways. I'm going to do a terminal here. My lovely fish shell, one of my favorite shells that I started using recently. So let's navigate to that. So we've got RenV cache. We got v5. And we got the folders here. You can see there's even an R4.0 folder because I was using this back when we had just version R403 or whatever it was. Let's look at the more recent one. We look at R-4.1. What do we have here? We got the x86. This should look familiar. This is actually similar to what you saw in the RStudio project when we were navigating through that RenV folder. And now you see These are all the packages that I have in my cache. And there's a lot, because I use a lot of packages. Certainly you see a lot of these that are not in that dummy little project I just set up. Like even Lobster is here, the package to explore object structures. What is in here, you ask? It does a separate folder for the version number. Does a separate folder for the hash of that version number. And then you get to the package itself. So what happens is that when RM knows you have a cache of stuff, it has a directory structure it needs, and it simply copies this into your main project. So this should look identical to what we have in the actual repository's project directory. Now, you don't have to use the cache. You can disable the cache if you really want to, but it saves a lot of time, and so far I've had no issues with it whatsoever. And to give a little history again, PackRat did not have an effective way of caching package installations. So no matter if I use Shiny in about 10 projects, every time I did PackRat with it, it would pull it manually every single time. Oh, lots of time lost because of that. But you live and learn. So the cache is important, and you do have capabilities of modifying where it goes by default. Now, by default, it'll go somewhere in your home directory, in a hidden directory, I believe. And there should be an article about that. We'll read that a little bit as we start talking about this. Should be in the Get Started folder. Yep, the cache. So here you can see, let me zoom in on this a little bit. On Linux, this is where it's going to go. It's going to go in your .local folder, share RM. On Mac OS, it's library application support RM. And on Windows, whatever that local app data means, that's where it goes. So that's cool. So it does that automatically, but again, you can override this. And why did I override it? Because Kevin wrote a great article about using RM with Docker. Literally the hook I needed to get all this set up once I figured out the VS Code stuff. So he's got great advice about creating Docker images with RM or running Docker containers with RM, which is what I'm doing. This is the approach I'm doing for all my dev container stuff, is this approach right here. Yes, and Daniel nailed it. I was waiting for somebody to connect the dots here. Yes, this is persistent storage. This is on my server, on a separate hard drive, and no matter what project I have, it's always going to go to that persistent storage. So that's why the cache is so awesome. And the fact that you can change where it goes via some clever use of environment variables, you are off to the races. Possibilities are endless, and I absolutely love the infrastructure that Kevin has done for this. So okay, so that kind of gets you started with RM, I think. And now we've gone a little under the hood of what's happening behind the scenes. But let's start exploring some of the other cool things we can do with RM. Let's see. Let me reinforce some of the collaborating things. I've said this verbatim, like verbally, I should say. But definitely recommend using Git with it in GitHub. Somebody should be designated as kind of like what I'll call the RM driver or maintainer. It's okay if you have other expert R users that want to update the package library, but you got to communicate with each other about this. What I like to do in my projects is I like to be that friendly dictator of our package library installs. And if they tell me, hey, Eric, we're working on this feature, but we need a new version of ggplot2. I talk with them, I determine is it really necessary, and if it is, then I take it upon myself to do a new branch to the repo, upgrade ggplot2, do further testing to make sure the app or package doesn't break, and only if I determine there's no regressions, then I do a snapshot, which will record the newest version of ggplot2, push that upstream to the GitHub repo, then they pull it down, they merge that into their feature branch, they refresh renv, and the way you refresh renv is the following. It's called renv restore. What restore does is it's saying, okay, based on the changes to the lock file, if that is more up to date than what my current package library has, then I'm going to help you make that update to the library. So restore is typically what happens when upstream has changed the lock file and you have to pull it down to your setup. So restore is definitely useful. You'll be using it, especially if you collaborate. So yeah, Daniel's right on the Docker questions. Am I using something to launch your containers? Absolutely yes. And what I'm using for that is, you've actually hinted to it just now. For the RStudio containers, I'm using Docker Compose. It's a very nice YAML structure. And if I ever had more than one container to interface with this RStudio one, like maybe a database container, some API program or whatever, I could just do different services. So what I do is I give it a unique name. I have a Docker file just for this container. I inject environment variables for the container name. I inject environment variables for the volume path, my user ID for the SSH key, and this is important, the RM path cache host mounted to RM path cache container in the compose file, and also grabbing some configurations I do in RStudio, mounting that into the config directory that the container expects, so that I get my fancy pane layout, my theme, and all that stuff in RStudio replicated in all these projects. And like I said, I have an environment file that I think we looked at earlier, but just to pull up one more time, that's grabbing all this information. So environment files are very helpful to make your Docker stuff more dynamic in things like Docker Compose that we, yeah, right there. Okay, so interesting, Daniel. You had separate persistent amounts per user. Okay. Yeah, that's certainly possible. You could have it so each user has their own version of a library. But for me, what's worked well is I want to eliminate any possible variation on specific systems by this whole GitHub setup with renv. I think it's helped a lot. The biggest issue I have is more just the discipline it takes to make sure that you're in sync with whoever is updating the package library, and that they don't go rogue and start installing a bunch of nonsense themselves, or worse yet, they try to blow away the RM stuff, whether on purpose or by accident, and then they try to commit that back to the upstream repo. Then bad things happen, and that's when I get very angry. It's happened a little bit once or twice before, and in my ancient age of 867 years, I'm getting tired of those issues. So that's the cache. That's the most low-level thing we'll probably talk about tonight, is the cache stuff. But I think it's really, really cool. So let me look at some other things here that might be helpful for people. There's a great FAQ here. This is really helpful if you're new to this and you wonder why things aren't going the way someone's expecting. So the first question is, why isn't my package being snapshotted into the lock file? Well, that's because of the default behavior. It's only going to look at the packages that it thinks are being used. And it has a function that's run under the hood to do this, this rm::dependencies. And it has different ways of doing it, but the default way is to say, unless a package is declared in a library statement, a requires statement, or in the description file of a package manifest, I'm not going to snapshot it. So it does like a little analysis of your R code, and you may have situations where you have a code script that's meant for prototyping, and maybe you want to install some packages for testing, but you don't want them in the log file. There are ways that you can ignore that stuff. I think that's a good thing to talk about right now. What I like to do in my projects, and again, my little head here is, there we go. What I like to do in my project is I like to have a directory. In fact, we'll use silly in this case since I already made it, where I just test stuff out, but A, I don't want the contents version controlled, and B, I don't want RM to care about it. So I will typically put a README there. We'll create it now. I think I did this even last night, but I'll just do it quickly here. This is a silly directory. All right, let's save that. We're gonna commit this, which should be here. Oh, we got the other stuff too. So let's do let's follow up some good practices here. Now let's see, why did this change? What's this about? Oh, I did the wrong file. Oh, rats. Okay. I didn't want to do it there, so that's where revert comes in, folks. Yep, there we go. Wanted to do it not here. Wanted to do it one above. Got too greedy there. This is where it should be. This should be more like it. Okay. Yeah, there we go. Well, let's commit these first. Add VS Code helpers. All right, got that. And now we're going to commit this. I would say initialize silly directory. And now what I'm about to do is I'm going to create an R script there that does something really complicated, or maybe would do something complicated. And let's save it in the silly chaos. You know what the chaos is? We're gonna start looking at pack. So first we're gonna install pack. This is the first, folks. Here we go. I have not done pack install ever on this system, so this is going to take a little longer. Looks like it has a few dependencies to grab, but they're binaries. Oh, we do have some cache stuff here, but some install binary, install cache, but it's here. Let me catch up on the chat for a little bit. Daniel's asking, what's stopping someone from installing a new package to test something out? Now, in my work projects, we actually don't have a shared library per se. It's not like what I do here. There is no shared cache or anything like that. That's just more for my personal projects. So I technically don't stop them from doing it, but they have to give me some real justification of why they want to put that package in without asking me first, because I'm really a stickler for that. Yeah, the dependencies function, really helpful. Agreed. And West Pasita Buddha asked, do you use Golem and RM together? Absolutely, yes. In fact, every shinycal, the stuff I did last night with brochure, that was our, oh wait, the brochure stuff was not, I take that back. But shinycal does use RM with the Golem package. I don't know if I've had major issues with it in the past. I think maybe it's the order of operations, what I would recommend. if you have a project that you want to use RM and Golem together with, get RM set up first, install Golem in the RM library, and then bootstrap your app. I think if you do that, you'll be okay. But if you go out of order, that might cause some of that issues you may have had. So I would say that might be something. There may be some shenanigans going on there. No comment on that one. Okay, so let's get the pack. So we got pack here. Now, the nice thing is that let me just save this chaos script. So we've got it in silly. Now, what I told you before is that RM is going to look for any files that has library statements, has require statements, has description files, and it will see if anything's been used. So let's check it out. Why did it know not to look there? Well, you know why? renv is smart enough to parse your gitignore file and ignore any directories, any files that if you're ignoring them for version control, it will definitely not try to look at them for your snapshotting purposes. So this is a really helpful trick. If you want to test things out and you want RM to be none for the wiser for it, just ignore it in version control and you're good to go. Now, what if you do want that stuff version control, but you still want RM to ignore it? Well, there are ways of doing that. Let me find where it is. I'm going to do a little search. You can create a .renv ignore file to instruct RM to ignore specific files, and maybe you still want version control, but you don't want RM to care about it. So getting back to what Daniel recommended, the dependencies function gives you more information about this and is a really helpful thing. Okay. Again, these are all kind of like my random tips about RM. I'm not sure if I have real order here, but they're all just coming to me as I go. Time for pack. I have never used pack before. I've heard of it, obviously. It's hard not to hear about it in our streamer group, but I'm going to start looking at how this works. So, I believe this is what you all like to use, pkg install. Now, I want to install a package that's going to have a boatload of dependencies. I'm going to load pack. Nothing bad happened there. pkg install. And we're going to go big, folks. Tidymodels. No, we're doing tidymodels. I want to make it even as something that's completely not been done in my projects yet. I'm pretty sure I've never done tidymodels. Here we go. Oh, I heard about this. How did I hear about this? I did a little homework before the stream tonight, folks. There is an open issue. Oh, Afton! Oh, that's very kind of you. We got some more bits. Oh my goodness, I'm going to have to make good use of this. Hadley, of all people, noticed this in March. If you use pack inside an RM use project, it would be nice if the packages were installed into the RM cache and then symlinked. There's been some great dialogue between Gabor and Kevin. It looks like they're looking at, do they have to enhance RM for it? I don't think there's been a solution yet. So it's a feature label. So this is not in yet. This is one downside of all this, is that it's made its own cache. But okay, let's let it do its thing. Let's say yes. We're gonna maximize the terminal in all its glory here. I forgot the keyboard shortcut for it. Where is it? I'm gonna zoom in on console here. Let's watch the fun begin. Okay, so it copied a whole bunch of stuff. I don't think it had tidymodel stuff, so it had some of the... Uh-oh. Uh-oh. That looks really cryptic. Well, when in doubt, restart R and try again. Let's do that. Let's do a session restart R. RM seems okay. We're gonna try this again. Well, that might be all she wrote. Let's see if this has been called upon before. I don't know if it'll be in here or the RM repo, but let's see if anybody's commented on this. Well. Okay. That's good news. It seems like there has been some activity here. Let's read what this is. I have the development version of Pack. Okay, so is this person. Okay. Let's see what this is about. Alright, we're really getting in the weeds here. Let's see what this says. I don't see anything bad here, but let's look at the version number. Let's pay attention to that. It's 0.1.2.1. Let's see what Pack is in the development version. I do remember when I was building the container for this. So let's bring this full circle here. When I built the container for this, at this step, there was an odd message. I don't know if I still have it. Let me see if I still have it. Rats. Do I have it? Let me see. Oh gosh, do I have it? Do I have it? I lost it. I used to have the Docker output here, but I don't think I do anymore. There was an odd message about if you're going to install the dev version, you had to do something different. So, okay. Anyway, so it failed here to get the dev version, which works for every other package. Every other package I can use install github.r just from the littler utility, and I give it the GitHub repo alias, and it magically works. So Pack is the first one that failed that. So that's learning number one. Let's see what they have to say about installing the dev version. I think that was linked somewhere here. Okay, let's see what it says here. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. No, I know what I did wrong. I'm surprised I didn't catch it earlier. When I installed Pack, let's look at our history. I think I know what happened. See that? See that? I installed the cran version. So it's not Pac's fault, it's user error. What else is new? So let's try this again.
Thank you for the follow, Antbez.
Oh, thank you, Antibes, for the follow. Much appreciated, and welcome if you're watching. Let's see. Okay, so this is a good RM learning experience too, is that when you install a new version of a package and you've already loaded it, it will detect this, that your new installed version is different than this. So please restart your R session so you get the new version. Packrat would not help you with such things, and you were kind of in trouble if you were doing such things. So let's restart our. I think this will fix it. So it was user error. Let's not blame Pack yet. I'm going to be nice to Pack. So let's try this again. And by the way, if your eyes catch it, we have our friendly little Mog going to the R logo as our follower train. All right, library Pack. Here we go again. Actually, let's run this function first, and let's make sure it detects the new version. Yes, it did. The dev version. We are good. Well, I don't know. There's an electric choice of music tonight with Rainwave. But anyway, let's give it a shot. Here we go. Let's see. What is that about? PKG depends. What is that? Go back to the. Is that a dependency? Okay, I feel like there's some odd things about to happen here, but let's try it. The PKG depends. I feel like we're about to go into a little like circular of package installs. Yep. Yeah, that's Mog from Final Fantasy, Afton. Little cute little guy from Final Fantasy VI. My favorite in the series. FF6. Yeah, Moogle. Sorry, Moogle. Yep. FF6 greater than FF7. Hot take number one. All right. Let's throw that in here. Okay. Let's try this again. Oh, well, we got it. Oh my gosh. Let's zoom in on this. This is exciting, folks. This is exciting. Look at this. Look at this. Oh my. Pack is working. $90 packages. New 52, downloaded 52 in 24 seconds. Oh my gosh. RenV and Pack work together after a little bit of finagling. They actually work. Woohoo! Not bad at all. Not bad at all. I am satisfied now. Let's see. Once again, RM should not be any for the wiser here. But let's see what status says. You know why I didn't pick it up, right? Because this is still in that ignored directory. But let's see what happens when we have another script in the same repo, but at the root of it, that loads tidymodels. I'm going to put that here. We're going to save this right here. Now, let's see if it picks it up. Okay. That's a lot of packages here. Definitely different. They're all associated with tidymodels. And let's see if snapshot does what it's supposed to do. Yes, I do. I think it worked. Let's confirm, shall we? Yep, we got a new script, new log file. Let's commit that. Added tidymodels through. Hack! All right. Push that up. Now there's one wrinkle here, right? What is not in the log file? Let's confirm. Pack is not in the log file because I had it in that ignore thing. So typically what I do in these cases, even if it's a script that's absolutely useless, I could even do it in this script. We want pack in the renv library, so if someone else wants to try this out, they will have it. Save it. Let's look at our status. Yep. Snapshot that. Yes. Boom. Now that should be updated here. So we went a little out of order there, but that's okay. Push it up and we're good. Ooh, that's a great point, Daniel. That's an excellent point. Well, let me take the latest one first, and then we'll get to the path one. But I do think you are right. When RM restores it, it's going to restore it through its own way of doing it. It's not going to call pack to do it, because at this point, from everything I've read on the issue trackers for both renv and pack, they're not seamlessly integrated together just yet in the restore process. Obviously, we just proved that a little bit of extra help, we can get it into the installation process, but not so much a restore process. So that's one downside that I'm sure Gabor and Kevin will be working on down the road. Now, the first question you had is, what's the path order RM looks for packages? Let's see what it shows just with the .libpass. So, to be clear, those packages for tidymodels are in the renv package library now. What pack did is that it circumvented the renv cache that I defined and made its own cache in my home directory somewhere. But yeah, I guess there could be ways of utilizing that renv dependencies function with pack. Perhaps it could. I think that's kind of what I probably went away from it. That it's kind of similar to what they were talking about with the cache issue here. I think they're trying to figure out a way to synchronize between the two, so you can see that RM could have something like this, RM cache synchronize, could do all sorts of things here. Cache list, yeah, there's other things they're working on, I guess. But interesting way of doing this, that we got it working at least, and we solved this. It was kind of user error of not having a dev version, but that was important enough that future me might forget about this. So we're gonna save the heck out of that bookmark. If you want to see what that was about, let me drag it on. I have a bookmark manager that I have in each of my browsers, so I'm bookmarking the heck out of this in case I need it. Make sure to install the version of pack. before using it. Okay. Good. All right. Yes, Daniel, I have. Some Shiny stuff, I'd forgotten I'd made a comment on some repos, not Shiny itself, but some of the other community of packages. And in fact, it kind of even happened today, but unfortunately, it wasn't so much an issue with upstream, it was an issue to myself. A weird esoteric issue with the pool package and DBI for database connections with the glue package. It was a weird interaction that I solved once before and I forgot about when I was doing that same feature in an app today. So yeah, I need a better memory in the head here. Yeah, sometimes you do have to hack around things. So, where we made a lot of progress here. I've covered a lot of ground, I think. But obviously the biggest achievement is that with eliminating a little user error, we did get Pack to work with renv, and now I am actually happy that I have a certain command that I will probably change after this stream. Instead of saying make it stop, I'm going to say bring it on. Bring on the Pack love. I am converted. You know, Jesse and others, you all got it to me finally, and now with my container workflow, it's working really well. The only downside is that the cache directory is not synchronized, but that'll come in the future. I really enjoyed that. It worked once we got it working, so yep. Okay, so what should we talk about now? I know we're kind of running at the time here. There was going to be some story time I was going to tell about. Yeah, good night, Cedar Prince. I'll be heading out soon too. Hope to see you on later. I got a lot going on in the weekend, I think. So I'm the curator for Art Weekly this week, which means that tomorrow night I gotta get that poll out there for the rest of the curators to vote on their highlight stories. I have major plans that I need to kind of debug with trusted sources on one of my media adventures. I have to test out some OBS stuff with some conference planning tomorrow. And I've got to fix a time zone issue. What do I mean by that? Let me show you my notes. Wait for it. It's a shinycal. In between Jesse finding this out the hard way on her live stream yesterday and some digging today, this is what I'm going to try and do. So, the issue is I need to see what that HTML widget is doing, the calendar widget, when somebody starts off or browses to shinycal from their computer that's in a different time zone. It's doing something, but I don't know what yet. I did some research online, and apparently I can use a program, or basically a Node.js module called Puppeteer. Puppeteer is a way to do headless browser for testing web apps in Node.js. Why the heck am I talking about this? It's because in something like Puppeteer, you can trick the headless browser to acting like it's from a different time zone. So this means I don't have to try and change my system to act like it's from Central or Mountain or Pacific and potentially destroy my system stability because I'm in a time zone that doesn't match with my network attached storage and all my Linux servers, and complete nonsense could happen. This will give me a way to do it in a sandbox environment, and then I can get to the bottom of running the Shiny app in this Puppeteer session and getting into the developer console to see what's happening with the JavaScript of the Toast UI calendar. Only then will I know how much offset it's doing. I'm both looking forward to this and not looking forward to this. I have wanted to do more testing of Shiny apps from a client side for a while, but to have it mingle with time zone differences gives me a lot of potential heartache. So I don't know how it's going to go, but that's my first pass at trying to diagnose it. And then, and somebody on the Toast UI calendar repo was also complaining about basically the same thing I tried to do. I want the calendar to not depend on the client's time zone. I want it to depend on the server time zone, i.e. what I define it as in the Shiny app deployment. So in other words, we have to start calculating. They say I should look at this time zone option, the JavaScript method here, which means defining my offset. I'm really not looking forward to that. But maybe if it works, it works. I don't know. So Daniel, yes, I think this is related to what you found before. And the issue is my workaround for you obviously did not work for others. So clearly I did not solve it the right way. Hence I have to go down this rabbit hole of time zones. And now I know why people complain about time zones so much. So that's got to be solved sooner or later. Now shinycal is actually getting some attention. So that's where I'm at. So it's gonna be a busy few days, but all good fun. Will I live stream it? I'm not sure yet, but we'll see. We'll see. So, I gotta fix it before the time change. Yes, I know. I'm not looking forward to that either. I think that's in early November, if I recall correctly. So it is going to be. It's going to be fixed soon. It's bugging me too much, and when something bugs me, especially for something that is, providing some value to people, I've got to fix it. So it's just going to be a challenge. Okay, to wrap things up a little bit, renv is a huge part of my workflow. I think if you're disciplined with it, especially in collaborative environments, it can work really well for you. I would recommend sticking with most of the defaults unless you have reasons to change it. And if you do have reasons to change it, they have different kind of articles that talk about certain settings. The reference has a lot of functions here that don't get talked about as much, but it can really help. Even like purging a package from the cache. If you completely broke something, you can do it. Yes, that is on my mind, Isomars. Just do another container with our Selenium or this Puppeteer. They're both kind of doing a similar thing, and test the app that way. Absolutely, I want to do Docker for that, because the last thing I'm going to do is screw up my streaming box that I put so much care and effort into because of a time zone issue. We're not mucking it up for that. So I will Docker all the way for this. Okay, so yeah, recommend looking at the package down site for RM. There's lots of great content there. And yes, Pack works. I am surprised, because as Daniel knows, we were watching this space early on in the history of RM and Pack, and they said it was not working at that time. So obviously things have changed to at least give some cooperation. Not perfect yet, but some cooperation. So good. Last thing I'll leave with before I sign off here is I had a really big presentation on Tuesday afternoon that was to a very important VP of a company to talk about some cool work we've done with machine learning of operationalizing, I'll call designs, and using machine learning with that, and a huge Shiny app with it. Not my biggest one, but my second biggest one that has had another vendor help me out with, and I'll be honest, sometimes it hasn't been help. It's been a little hurt, because they don't listen to my instructions about renv and GitHub, but better not rant about that too much. But presentation went really well, but the wrinkle in this is that this wasn't just me doing this. This was I became a manager last year, albeit only for a single new hire, but they came in with really strong skills. They have some experience already. And even the VP of my company that we were presenting to, when this my new hire was looking for work, he somehow got wind of it, and he was like, he had emailed us and said, "Hey, do we know this person?" And I knew the name sounded familiar, and it turns out they actually presented at one of the RStudio conferences, and I had seen their presentation, which was something about a really cool topic. And then sure enough, they applied. We had an interview, all virtual, of course. I was listening to their presentation, and I asked a couple of questions. They were well spoken, and then they had asked me, "Hey, Eric, what do you think?" And I'm like, "Yeah, they sound really solid. I think we could do some good work." And they said, "Congratulations, they'll report to you." And I'm like, "Okay." Oh, Nick is here. Welcome, Nick. I'm kind of wrapping up with a dev story, but I'll be on for a little longer. Great to see you. I haven't been on your streams lately because I've been doing a little streaming homework on my own, but thank you. So yeah, I became a manager. This person is doing great work. Very sharp with R, very sharp with even shinycal after I gave them a little heads up on how things were going and the ways I bootstrap things. And they're doing great. Really couldn't be happier with them. But so back to the presentation now, this was one of the first times that they had a great chance to talk about the great work that they've been doing with this VP ever since they joined the company. So this is interesting. This is like a situation where I'm trying to put someone else in a good position for success. This isn't just about me anymore. And I heard through the grapevine that this VP wanted to make sure that I was very good in this situation with this person, that I got them off on the right foot, that I gave them the right opportunities, that I didn't mess things up, I guess. So there's been a little pressure on me to make sure I'm doing what I can as a manager to be well supportive of this. I think I've been doing okay. I've been getting them involved with stuff. I've been giving advice. I've been peer reviewing their changes. We are able to talk a lot of technical things together, but I also have to help with kind of the practical aspects of the job, what it's like working at the company, how to get networked, getting more visibility, all this stuff. Hey, Nick, welcome. Sorry, my alerts don't quite work on that, but we have a raid. Thank you very much. So I'm winding up kind of a developer story from the day job as I kind of wind down here. So this presentation, I lead it off, but then I turn it over to my direct report to carry through the rest of the technical bits of the machine learning improvements they made, of the improvements they made to the Shiny app development, and in particular testing the Shiny app. And it seemed like they liked it. Like, we worked on that presentation deck for the whole month. They did most of the work. I added a few bits in the intro and kind of the key summaries to lead off with. And it was well received. There were some very hard questions from some of the members of the audience. Some we were prepared for and some we were not. But they handled themselves really well. I try to handle myself well in this situation. But again, the thing that's different for me in this case is that I've given presentations to this VP before. Sometimes I get a little nervous, but I've been down the road a little bit. But making sure my direct report was prepared for it, I was nervous for them. It's kind of like I want to make sure they have everything they need. They have my support. They are being it's being shown in an obvious way the great work they've been doing in the ML algorithms and the Shiny app development and all that. So I was nervous as heck for that reason, but they did great. It seems like the VP, other than maybe us doing a little homework on some certain metric tracking, we're in a good spot. So went well. A lot of work went into it. I hope they give them more opportunities, but it's a different part of the brain when you're managing people versus me heads down with production Shiny development, simulation package development, helping people out with debugging issues, where I've had a lot of issues for debugging this week, especially around importing SAS data sets into R, which is one of the most boring and silly things I ever have to deal with, but it's a reality of my industry. So it's been an interesting week, but I think we did good things with it. So things are wrapping up at the end of the year. So a lot of times in the industry, you have budgets that you have to meet to finish up projects, and I have a big kind of collection of packages that I've been developing with very talented people in my group that are going to be released at the end of the year to help statisticians conduct simulations even more easier than they do before. Okay, well, you opened the Pandora's box, Daniel. I'm gonna chime in on this. Does Haven not just work with SAS 7B that data sets? Unfortunately, no. Now, why is this? Well, let's get a little context here. SAS 7B that datasets are, of course, a proprietary format from SAS. They will never, in their time, give people like the R community the full specs of this file. So everybody's been reverse engineering it to the best of their ability. Haven is wrapped on a C++ library that does a really good job, I'll say 90% of the time. But there's an extra 10% that just completely fail. Completely fail. And there is no way I have found to figure out why. Some people think it's encoding issues. Some people think it's weird Unicode symbols. I have no idea. So, where I come into picture on this is that I took it upon myself, because I got so annoyed by this when I was doing analysis of SAS data sets and merging it with complicated genetic sets, that I wrote a wrapper on top of Haven. Yeah, I'll get to the CSV stuff in a little bit. I wrote a wrapper on top of it that's meant for internal use only, so I can't open source it. Its secret sauce, if you will, is that when it imports a SAS dataset, it goes one of two methods. The first method is with the Haven package. If that works without error, there's your data. Go forth with your analysis. If there's an error in that process, I have conditional logic to detect if an error is there, and if it is, go to plan B. What's plan B? As much as it pains me to say this, plan B is executing SAS from the command line to read in the data set in SAS's way, resave it out to a temporary directory, and that act of resaving it out with the command line version of SAS, and then using the Haven package to import that new temp copy of the SAS dataset, for whatever reason, that one works. If I knew the answer, I would tell you all. I have no earthly idea, but I have a wrapper package just for that purpose, as silly as it sounds. But that depends on SAS, and some people don't have the right access to the SAS environment that we have from that lower level, and so they get angry at me when they get errors in that, and I say, okay, did you get in the right security group? You're not? Okay, well, that's an IT request. So I had two people ask me about that this week, one very knowledgeable, one not so knowledgeable, and it's just a lot of bandwidth to debate that. They are in fact not the same size. There is some subtle difference that's being performed when it's re-exported isomorph, and I have no easy way of comparing the two from a very low level standpoint. The contents, when you view them in SAS, are exactly the same. It just does not make sense. And it will not, I will not escape it because I'm the maintainer of that wrapper package. Yeah, everybody goes to me. I've tried to train someone else with it and I've gone pretty well with it, but they can't answer those low-level things, and then they punt it to me, and then my life is still in this circular motion of debugging SAS dataset issues. So that's been one thing this week. Other stuff going on has been mostly good. Apps that are broken because I forgot to update them when they were redeployed, I fixed that. Looking at some new backend technology for ML. So there's lots of cool stuff. Oh, I bet, yeah, I'll check out the Discord after this. But on the bright side today is that I had a cool session with my internal R user group. I maintain that. I have people helping me with it. We were looking for a topic, but I figured, well, since we don't have a dedicated topic today, why don't I talk about how I keep up with the R community? Because in my company, we have a handful of people that I would say are passionate about R like I am. Not exactly the same, but very close. There's one that definitely is exactly the same in my passion level. He's the author of the targets package, so do the math on that. And others that are kind of in between. They're interested, but they don't really go out of their way to find stuff. And then there are others that simply use R to do their job. They do not care about the community. They need somebody to tell them what package to use. They probably need somebody to tell them how to use the package because they're not good at reading documentation. I shouldn't be that harsh, not all of them, but there's a handful. So I wanted to kind of give them some resources to help me out to keep up with it. So guess what I plugged? It'll be to the surprise of no one. I plugged, let me get to my fancy browser here. I plugged R Weekly, of course, because R Weekly is awesome and it gives me this one-stop place to keep up to date with the R community. Now, across these different sections, we got the highlighted stories that are the top 3 that we voted on, the uses of R in the real world, how R in industry is being used, new packages coming up, updated packages, videos and podcasts, which I really like, as you know, project updates in R itself, upcoming events. There's one that I'm going to be heavily involved with coming in November, and quotes of the week for a little fun here. This is like even hidden gems here, like this glue down package. Who knew about this? Lots of good stuff here. And making tables. Yeah, tables are a thing these days, for sure. So I showed them this. I showed them a few other things like user group sites, meetups or R ladies, or the Slack, R for Data Science Slack group. I sent them all this. But just like when I was giving like an interactive code demo a month ago, other than a handful of what I'll call the enthusiasts that really like what we talk about, it is absolute crickets. I have no idea if it was useful to people, but I tried to tell them that in open source, if you broaden your perspective a little bit and you kind of maybe make a little modification in how you discover information on maybe a package you're using, or trying to figure out what's the latest and greatest in, say, the machine learning space and the Shiny space and things like that, it's a brave world. I mean, well, it's not, that's a wrong choice of words. It's a fascinating world to curate and to be a part of. And I told them that my involvement with the community over the last, frankly, ever since I started work, That was after my dissertation, where R saved my dissertation, and that's when I started following David Smith's blog on revolutions. I started the podcast shortly thereafter, started connecting with package authors and others, and that made so many things for me that not just helped my hobby, but helped my day job too. So maybe they understood it, maybe they didn't, but I used the forum that I led today to kind of share that, and maybe I awakened some people, maybe not, but it's totally different than talking to all of you. All of you here are engaged in parts of the community one way or another, and I can almost count on that. Sometimes when you get to industry, you work with some people that, like I said, are just using it for their job. They could care less about it, and it's just another tool. I think R is way more than just another tool. I think it's almost everything that I like in data science and application building, all that good stuff. So that's beside the point. So let me catch up on the chat here. So okay, we're talking about Lubrigate, right? So I've heard that it is fixed, that the fix has been pushed. But this has probably been one of the bigger disturbances in the community recently, is how all this went down. And for those that aren't aware, Lubrigate had a test that failed on M1 Max, which is kind of new for the R core team to be testing. It's unclear when they notified the maintainers of Lubrigate, i.e. RStudio. But then they sent an email to not only the maintainers of Lubrigate, but also the packages that import Lubrigate, all of their maintainers, that Lubrigate was going to get wiped off of CRAN in a couple weeks if it wasn't fixed right away, and they better plan accordingly. Eesh, rough. Not the best way to go. This is not the first time it's happened, but I admit this was pretty high profile because of all the packages for this to happen to. I don't think anybody expected this to happen to Lubrigate, and it's used in so many analyses, so many tools that do any kind of datetime transformation. And to be perfectly clear, shinycal uses it on top of the clock package as well. So I, of course, have a vested interest in this, but it's been rough. I think it's getting sorted out, but as I have talked about before, that there are some initiatives in the works, some working groups of the R Consortium that are kind of looking at least getting a better dialogue with the R core team about these issues of CRAN, about kind of the process around it. It's a gamble. It's kind of a gamble, and I got some inside info on this today, actually, right after that forum meeting from my, I'll call my trusted source. There's some risk involved here. There's risk of putting necks out there, so to speak, and maybe getting some of the R core team angry about this. But it's kind of reached a point where I think it has to happen. There has to be some change here. It's going to take time, but that just was not the best way to go about it. It could have been handled better, and I think these situations just kind of underscore the importance of looking at these in more detail. So yeah, it's definitely been a hot topic around the community these days, both the broader R community on Twitter and the like, even within our streamer group, we've been talking about it. So Web Pasita Buddha, you mentioned that. Oh, are you referring to the user? Are you referring to the user group in Indiana by chance? I know about the Salt Lake City one. Yeah, Julia Silge does a great job with that. Python's PyPy has 0 review process. See, that's the thing, is that other packages maybe have some automated checks, if that, but not a lot of other reviews in it. And it can be a Wild West. I mean, there have been stories where the Node Package Manager, NPM, had modules that got in that had basically cryptocurrency, viruses, or I forgot what the technical term is, but little programs that would launch Bitcoin mining or attempts to do that on your computer without you knowing it. So there's always a trade-off between like little checks manually and maybe too much checks manually. But it's also a matter of, okay, when you look at checks that fail, what are the most important ones that you want to care about? We all know that like the M1 architecture is fairly new, and only just now are we starting to see our users start to get their hands on M1 and building and compiling R on it and getting through some issues. But it's going to take time. And this is the complete opposite spectrum of an OS that's been around way too long, you might say, and Solaris, which often is the bane of some package maintainers' existence, because some tests on Solaris will fail, yet they won't fail on General Linux, General Mac, General Windows. It's crazy. So there's a lot going on in that space, but we'll see if it resolves from there. Yeah, Max has been encountering some Solaris issues. I do feel bad for him. I have not released a package on CRAN since 2010, I think. Maybe someday I will again. But one of the efforts that has my attention that kind of gives you the best of both worlds is called the R Universe project from ROpenSci. I've covered this on the R Weekly Highlights podcast a couple times, but it's kind of like a cross between using GitHub as your repo and a boatload of automated checks and transparent kind of access to these packages. We can look at the dashboard real quick. There's lots of great things on here. I think Tan is on here with his packages somewhere here. But we have even Colin Fay from ThinkR. He's got entries on here. I'm not sure what that just did. Oh, it gives like links to the builds for each of these packages on the ROpenSci project. Okay, I haven't dived with that as much, but yeah, so okay, this is what I meant to click on. So this is all of his packages on the R Universe project. We got Golem here, we got many others. Yeah, brochure's on here too. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, okay, that's good to know. Yep, so it's a great little curated source. So I'll wrap up here in a couple minutes, but I'll take a couple more questions. So Daniel's saying for companies, I think internally that's what Dirk's Drat package is good for. So Drat is another take on coming up with your own custom repository. I would say it's a little more lower level, so to speak. But it's great if you want to do this like offline, a local kind of a repository of packages, and you want to use that as like a source for your sharing of these. So some of these in the community have used this. Some of them, I'm not sure how up to date this is, but yeah, I haven't used Drat myself, but the key is that when you install a package, you feed in the repo where that Drat repo is, and then you can basically install it from there instead of CRAN or another place. So yeah, so the Drat is definitely another option. I kind of like the bells and whistles around our universe right now, so this is what I might try to do if I want to publish like a Shiny app, not just in GitHub for the source code, but also as a full-blown package. I think I'll probably try this R Universe for it as well. They have lots of information here about articles that are contributed from the maintainers of these separate repos. So like NFL plot R, I think, yeah, from the NFL verse. I know Tan's involved with this. So there's lots of good stuff on our universe. So highly recommended. Okay. All right, I think with that we've covered a lot of ground tonight. Recapping, renv You should use it, especially if you're doing anything with collaboration and any hint of a project that's going to be used in production or some kind of high profile analysis. Definitely do it. Use it with Git so that you can effectively version control all the changes to your renv library. And we have verified that Pack, with a little help along the way, is definitely working for installing packages to renv. Just not quite as seamless for restoring from it. But Pack is good. I have been converted. You all have done a great job in convincing me to try it. And now I will smile whenever I see the Pack spam on the Twitch chats. Okay. So, if you want to get a hold of me, the best place is probably on Twitter at the Rcast. Find all the recordings of previous live streams and my interviews at the YouTube of Shiny Developer Series channel, linked right there. And the GitHub, I have GitHub, github.com/rpodcast. That's where all the major stuff I do. And of course, our weekly highlights and the R podcast itself, if you want your audio content about R delivered to you, free of charge, of course. So if you've been watching this on YouTube, this was streamed on Twitch on October 7th. Now it's October 8th as we're wrapping this up. But definitely keep in touch. Subscribe to the channel if you want future updates. And if you want to see this live, head to twitch.tv/rpodcast and send me a follow or even subscribe if you're really liking the material I put out there. So let's end it here. Like I said, I got a lot going on this week. Let me entertain one more question. If you mean the R podcast episodes, yes, those are on YouTube on a different channel. I will find that and link that out at some point. I have not uploaded the R Weekly Highlight podcast on YouTube, but I can do that if there's enough demand for it. I have all the episodes on my hard drive. It's just a matter of getting a clever video in front of it and then posting it with the show notes. So the key is automation. I don't want to do that point and click. I want to automate the heck out of that. So maybe that's a topic for a future stream. Okay. Let's bid you all good night, and thanks for hanging around for a story time with Eric. And thanks for the little bits that were shared earlier. I'm definitely going to put that to good use. So take care. I'll see you around all the different Twitch, our data science streams and all our fun stuff. So have a great rest of your night, great weekend, and see you next week. Bye for now.